this week's Parsha, Pinchas, we read about the daughters of Zelophehad, a narrative that concludes the last portion of the book of Numbers. Zelophehad dies and leaves behind his 5 surviving children, all daughters. At the time, inheritance was passed only to sons, and if a man didn't have any sons, then everything would go to his closest male relative, thereby passing over one's daughters. The women, unified in their position, protest the unjust law to Moses. They are the rightful heirs to their father's property, they argue, and gender should not dictate how much each child gets, in their case, nothing. Moses confers with God and returns with the answers that the daughters can indeed inherit from their father, but really only to preserve his legacy. This can certainly be seen as a step forward for women in the male-dominant culture of the Bible. At the conclusion of the story, however, after initially being given rights to inherit, those rights are narrowed, and thus the amended law appears to be a setback after the daughters' startling triumph, where they won significant rights for themselves and for women in the future. At the end of the story, the 5 sisters in particular, and Israelite women in general, walk away with less than they had before. Viewed in its entirety, the loss of their initial rights seems to perpetuate the all too familiar situation when people in power are not comfortable in sharing power and privileges they take for granted with others. We are still living in a world and culture with similar injustices, and, as we are all well aware, racial injustice too. Just because slavery ended in 1865 and Jim Crow laws were struck down in 1965 does not mean that people of color have received the justice and equality they rightfully deserve. We still very much need courageous individuals like the daughters of Zelophehad to stand up for the injustices. We need to join our siblings of color in the struggle for racial equality. The daughters provide us with an inspiring example of women who believed in something they had never seen before. May we believe in our power to continue to fight for something we have never seen either: full equality under the law in all facets of everyday life, and an end to overt racism and racist beliefs. As you enjoy a Shabbat meal, perhaps over Zoom with family and friends, consider how you might continue the legacy of the daughters in your own life. How can you speak up like them? How can you advocate for racial justice? And how can you help to bring more kindness into the world? Shabbat Shalom.